All right, back with the WMAY morning news feed. I'm Greg Bishop at 6:40. Again, if you haven't checked your clocks, be sure to make those clocks correct. You fell back an hour, which added an extra hour of sleep. Hopefully, you took advantage of that extra hour throughout the weekend. I definitely was able to wake up nice and early this morning, get a good workout in. Hopefully, I can keep consistent with that and actually working out in the morning. But joining us live here at the Riverton Ranch is State Representative Tim Butler. Representative, you've been all over the place. Of course, I wanted to bring you in to talk a bit about the change in time. And just for full disclosure here, I thought I was having you on an hour from now. So
I'm usually I'm an early riser. I get going. I looked at your text the other day and I read it the right way and I put it on my calendar the wrong way. So I guess I forgot to fall back for this today. This is a great segue.
Well, it's an awesome way also to talk about the time change.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And how it kind of throws people off a bit. But you were down in Florida when we were communicating back and forth.
We were down there this week for the National Conference on State Legislatures. Got to see Governor DeSantis speak on Friday, and as he was introduced, the governor of the free state of Florida. So that was as I was listening to you on the way out here, all about especially the masks and things like that. And going to a state like Florida, it's certainly a different setting than it is here in Illinois. That's for sure.
So if we can talk a little bit about the state legislative or the NCLS or
NCSL, yeah, right.
NCSL.
Right.
We can talk about that a bit, but let's talk about the time change stuff. Because a lot of people, they get told, hey, it's got to change the clocks. They're not necessarily ready for it. But just break it down for us why we have this and what daylight saving time is and what daylight saving time is not.
Yeah. So, first of all, daylight saving time versus standard time. So standard time is what we are on today, what we fell back to early Sunday morning. So standard time is winter time, to think of it. Daylight saving time is summertime, and what we have the rest of the year from March to November, when it was changed a decade or so ago. And really, when you go back and you look at the history of really time zones and all this stuff, one of the reasons we're here today is we used to, in this country, have literally hundreds of time zones. And it wreaked havoc on train schedules and things like this, and trying to keep it straight was impossible for especially for travel for trains and things like that. So we kind of normalized things, went to the time zones, and then as a part of an effort to save energy back 100 years ago or so, we looked at going to daylight saving time. So you have hours of light later on the clock in the day. I mean, everybody says, oh, I'm losing an hour of light or I'm gaining an hour. You don't really gain. The sun doesn't change. The sun doesn't respect it, but it just falls differently on the clock. And so it's something, that certainly we've talked about in this country for a long time, and we continue to talk about. Obviously, we talk about it twice a year for sure, but throughout the year we hear about it more and more.
So we have different bills that have been filed. I think that last count, there's like 7 or 8 from a handful of legislators, and they take different tacks, different approaches to this. Talk about the different proposals that there are out there and what you're supporting.
Yeah, so I know there was a resolution. I think Representative Sosnowski introduced a resolution to study it further. Some people have introduced legislation. Most people want to introduce legislation to go to permanent daylight saving time, so permanent summertime. So I've introduced legislation that goes the opposite, to go to permanent standard time. And one of the reasons
that would be what we're in now.
Currently today. Now,
okay.
And the way I explain it, I mean, when I look out the window here and I see that it's light outside, two mornings ago, it wasn't light at this hour.
Right.
It was dark. Yet last night, obviously, as we all went into the evening hours, we saw that, it's dark by 5:30.
Not even that. It was like 4:45. I'm like, it's already dark outside. What is going on here?
And so that's, this is the problem, is that how you set up your artificial time telling device, your clock, doesn't change the fact we only have X amount of hours of daylight throughout the day. And so really, when I introduced my legislation, was in response to when Andy Minar was in the Senate, he passed a piece of legislation out of the Senate that was at the behest of some school children from his district. We do that often. School kids come to us and say we want to introduce bills and things like that. And Andy passed it out of the Senate. And honestly, I don't think there was a lot of discussion given to it to go to permanent daylight saving time. Now, I'm someone who, like yourself, tries to get up earlier in the morning. It's make it tougher under COVID, but get earlier up in the morning, try to get going and things like that. And I appreciate daylight in the morning. The other thing is, if it's still dark outside at 8 o'clock or 8:30, almost 8:30, once we get to the late December here in Central Illinois, you've got kids waiting out there at bus stops in the morning and things like that. Now, granted, in the afternoon, it's a whole different story. We tried this in the early 70s, where we went to permanent daylight saving time on a temporary basis. I think it was for a 2-year basis, and after about 6 months. Going into the fall and into the winter, when parents were yelling at their members of Congress, they changed it. They changed it back to the way it was. And so I think
which goes to show again, parents are very important.
Parents are very
when it
important
comes to setting policy.
It's parents have a large thing to say with your school children. That's for sure. And I wish more folks would realize that. But my point really on this whole thing is, if this is something we're seriously going to do, we just can't do it on a whim. I mean, we have to think seriously about it. We have to study it. And also, how does moving the time change one way or the other impact our surrounding states? We have a lot of Illinoisans that commute, or a lot of Indianans that commute into Illinois, probably some Illinoisans that commute into Indiana, certainly Illinoisans that commute to St. Louis. So when you're going across borders of states, it impacts, your routine as well. And so I think this is something we really need to take a look at and study if we're going to take action. My seatmate, Mike Murphy, doesn't like my idea, but he always says his wife Cindy likes it. Why don't we just leave it the way it is? It's you get more light in the summer in the evening and more light in the morning in the winter. So
it's just kind of where you're at on the globe as to how much sun you're going to get.
Well, and so I mean, you look at just to the east of us in Indianapolis this morning. Their sunrise even on standard time is now like 7:20. So Saturday morning they were light. It wasn't light until 8:30 in Indianapolis. So now think about that in December. How different that would be in December. Just a month and a half from now, you're gonna be dark in the morning until 9:30 practically.
We're talking with State Representative Tim Butler here on the WMAY morning news feed at 6:46. Again, 6:46. Be sure to check your clock so you show up on time, or you're not too early to something. I'm sorry, Representative.
Yeah.
When I saw you at the front door, I was like, wait a second.
I changed all my clocks. I did everything. I just, I woke up at 5 o'clock. I'm like, all right, let's get rolling.
All right. So, let's talk about some other issues here. One other thing I do want to touch base with you on is the mapping. We've got now 3 different challenges. What's the latest there? We're going to have them all kind of consolidated together because of the timeline here to get, January.
So there's we're in front of a 3-judge federal panel in the Northern District of Illinois. And so there's the filings from Leader McConkey and Leader Durkin that went in that represented the 2 caucuses. There's a filing from Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund. And then the NAACP came in later, and that was all consolidated basically into one case. There was a status hearing last week, to update it a little bit. And then what the court has told the attorneys is that you have until this Wednesday, the plaintiffs in the case, you have until Wednesday to file whatever they're going to file in looking at the current maps that were passed in August. So the court said, hey, give us some ideas on the maps. Give us ideas what you think. And these all revolve around what are called Section 2 claims for minority voting rights. So for Latino voting rights and African American voting rights. And so I think by on Wednesday, you're going to see the attorneys file probably some responses on maybe how districts could be different, especially in those areas that are impacted by the Section 2 claims. The other thing I'll say about the court, remember, we passed maps in August, but we also passed maps in May based off what was the American Community Survey data. And the courts found those maps unconstitutional. So the governor signed a piece of legislation that was found in violation of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. And so we're at a point today where the court has basically said, look, we're taking charge of this. We want some Democrats. You had your opportunity. The rest of the plaintiffs, give us your ideas on this. And then I think the court's going to make a decision probably, maybe early December or so.
Why is it so important that they make this decision earlier rather than later?
Well, the court has asked advice from the State Board of Elections to make sure they're with the timelines. In Illinois, when we move the primary to June, and in Illinois, that means in Illinois, you get to vote 40 days before an election. We have early voting for 40 days before an election, which pushes the timeline back for circulation and all that kind of things. So the circulation for offices for next November will begin in mid-January, January 13th. So we need to have this finalized soon so folks can go out and circulate petitions to get on the ballot. And the court understands that they need to respect that timeline.
We've seen already some people announce that they're not going to run. Your seatmate, Representative Murphy, for instance. And we've seen others say that they're just going to be stepping down, not running again. I think John D'Amico was one.
Yeah, and John D'Amico announced the other day.
D'Amico.
Right. Yeah, right.
So, you're going to have this process in some areas where there could be an appointment process. Others just carrying out their term until the end of the term. Where do you stand? Are you running? Tell us what your thinking is there.
Yeah, I'm definitely planning to run for re-election in whatever my district ends up. Currently my district that I represent today goes from the north end of Springfield all the way up to Pekin. The district that I've been drawn into takes much more of the city of Springfield, and then goes down in a little bit of Christian County and a little slice of Macon County as well. So what I've said from the beginning is I'm planning to run for re-election. I want to see what happens with this court case until it's all finalized to make some sort of formal announcement. But I'm certainly planning on running for re-election in the 22 election.
Talk, if you can, a bit about this process of being appointed. You yourself were appointed.
Right.
And one of the things that I saw on the Being Blago documentary, if you haven't seen that, the docuseries.
I haven't seen it yet.
Fascinating. They touch on how Illinois is, and they put on like a whiteboard, all of the names of state representatives that were appointed.
Yeah.
And Mays Jackson up in Chicago, radio host, he was kind of highlighting this as it's a constant thing we see in Illinois where people don't really get a choice. They get somebody put in and they finish out a term or whatnot. How can we combat that?
Yeah, I think it's something that we've talked a lot about. I've my colleague Kelly Cassidy and I, who comes from the other end of the ideological spectrum than me, but we get along very well. She was appointed as well. We've had a lot of conversations about this, about how, I think in an office such as state representative, first of all, where you run for every 2 years.
Every 2 years, right.
And secondly, the cost of a when I got appointed to cover 4 counties in central Illinois and, in March of the off year, the cost of putting on an election just for that seat, I think is prohibitive for having a special election. Now, some people might disagree with that, but I think when you're running, especially every 2 years, it's pretty easy to say, let's do an appointment process. But I do think there needs to be more transparency around it. I think there needs to be better openness for the selection process for the parties. I mean, now it's under Illinois law. The appointment for a seat as Representative Murphy's would come from the local Republicans. That's because it's a Representative Murphy's Republican, so a Republican would be appointed to that seat. I don't think that's a bad process. I just think there needs to be more transparency and more openness about it. Now, when you look at something like maybe a state senator who's on a 4-year term, maybe they should run in the next general election or something like that, which I think might be the case. But I think it's on balance. The smaller the office, the tougher it is to say, hey, let's do a special election because of the cost of it. U.S. House races, there's no appointments to the U.S. House. They're all special elections across the country. But the U.S. Senate varies by state. So in Illinois, here we have an appointment process for United States Senator. Now, that's a pretty big deal when you think a state of 13 million people almost that you have an appointment for it.
Which in some instances, if a certain governor gets that appointment, then it becomes a bleeping golden.
That's how you end up with Roland Burris as United States Senator. You got it, right.
Representative Tim Butler, going to take actually, you know what? No, if we take the break, it's going to take us right to the top of the hour. I think I've gotten all I can out of this segment. So anything else that's top of mind you guys are off until the beginning of January.
Yeah, we're scheduled not to come back.
You got a truncated, you guys are adjourning April 8th.
So we go back in January 4th, and then we are scheduled to adjourn April 8th, so the week before
What's that
Easter.
All about?
And that's all about the Democrats wanting to make sure that their folks get home and campaign before the primary. That's honestly what it's all about. I mean, if you think our regular session, which goes till the end of May, that only gives folks a month to campaign before the primary. It's going to be interesting to see how we use this truncated session. The days that are scheduled actually are the days that were scheduled to be in session aren't that much different than a usual session, but I'll be really interested to see how many days get canceled. I don't know how much we can get done in January when bills are just getting introduced and things like that. So, but hopefully, I've always thought we should start doing our work a little earlier, so it's not coming down to the end of the day, and hopefully we'll see something get done in the spring.
State Representative Tim Butler here on the WMAY Morning News Feed. Greatly appreciate you taking the time this morning.
Appreciate it.
It is the WMAY Morning News Feed. Much more coming up. Stay tuned.
$15 per hour is a lot of cheddar. Culver's West on Wabash pays top dollar for adult employees. Apply in person today.
The Springfield History Minute with the Sangamon County Historical Society. The young city of Springfield saw several attempts to launch a newspaper as a sustainable business venture, but the early efforts were doomed to failure. The Sangamo Spectator was started in 1826, but the business burned down in 1829. What was left was purchased by a new owner who changed the name to the Journal and Sangamo Gazette. But ink and paper supply problems meant the paper only published sporadically, and it soon went under, as did another